Jessie Sage. This is episode 19, When We're Not Hustling. And this is another special episode to me because the guest is my partner, PJ Patella Ray. You guys can introduce yourself and then I will talk about the episode. Sorry.
Emily Foster. I'm the producer of When We're Not Hustling. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/sapiotextual.
Thank you.
And I am Melissa Milk, a local BDSM and kink practitioner and educator in the Pittsburgh area.
Yeah, I am happy to have you two here. So this is the last real episode of the season. So the last episode is going to be a roundtable discussion, but this is the last episode in the normal format. And I thought that because I put out the most personal episode that I've put out in my career earlier in the season with my mom and talked about like what impact being a sex worker has had on my life and my relationship with my family, because it was fairly significant. I thought that it might also be good as we're talking about what sex work allows for us to do and who it allows for us to be, to bring on my spouse to talk about what that looks like for them, because spouses or partners of sex workers, for a lot of reasons, are not something that's often talked about, in part because in sex work discourse, we center sex workers, which makes sense, but sex workers' families also live a sex worker life in a lot of ways. And so I thought that would be really important. But PJ isn't just a sex worker partner in the sense that my entire career started with PJ, and PJ and I worked very, very closely together for a very long time. And PJ actually really helped to promote me and my career and even my writing and getting me like connections that I didn't have before our relationship. And PJ is a very good copy editor and did they rarely edit me anymore because now I just have my own rhythm and things going, but really did work with me to build this Jessie Sage brand that they're often not recognized in at all. And that's been hard for our relationship, but also a lot of things happen that they talk about in the episode that pushed them in one direction and me like deeper into sex work. And so they're no longer they no longer do sex work unless you count like bring your partner to work day, which has happened every once in a while. And which is my favorite day. They don't participate in sex work, and they are a full-time professor living like a very different life, but still with me. So I thought it would be interesting to talk to them about what that's looked like. And so we're wrapping up the season with them.
I like that you decided to wrap up the season with PJ, because knowing the two of you, it's very obvious when you talk with you how PJ has had such an effect on the entire trajectory of your sex work. Yeah. And like, it's funny that other people don't acknowledge, but you're constantly giving credit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know how I couldn't, because they've been so integral to even thinking, like I said in the last after party, that I think my Twitter handle even was like PJ's idea, because the first like half of our relationship was us talking about where we were going, what we wanted to do, our careers, our brand. Like we worked so closely together. And that was like often how we bonded, was like sitting and talking for long periods of time about who Jessie Sage is and what we're doing and the podcast that we did together and the activism that we did together. And I know for sure that I wouldn't have built this by myself.
It's also possible we wouldn't have met.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because PJ is like, you should talk to this person.
I know. Because PJ shot something that you did with another performer.
Yeah. one of the performances with my partner, Ash. We're Milk and Ash, but
but also with
Aiden.
Yeah,
Aiden's the Flame, who is another, person and creative who works and performs, under, a sexual umbrella or with sexual connotations. And yeah, so that's a big deal. It's also, I feel like this episode introduced me to more of, you just don't, like, PJ doesn't talk a lot.
No. That's true.
I got to hear PJ talk more, and funny enough, I feel like we will probably have more conversations about being non-binary and how that, just has a general effect on the way you carry yourself through life. And I also really identify with and am the same way in that, like, I don't identify as being on the gender spectrum. I'm just like, gender, trash can.
Yeah.
Like,
that's how PJ feels. Yeah.
It's none of it really. And maybe it's the autism. Really rings very true for me. I feel like you would also appreciate the fact that I listened to this episode in bed with Lauren.
Oh,
So because of the avenues that I'm sort of stepping into, Lauren doesn't really have the desire to pursue an individual career in sex work. And it's kind of like, I'm happy to be here doing this with you and educating people.
Yeah.
And also is very community focused.
Yeah.
And it's like, but like, will probably be taking on more of the sort of like PJ role.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you talk about the fact that PJ doesn't talk a lot, because I think that actually it's in part structural, like in terms of gender, and it's in part like but it's also in part personality, because PJ is a much quieter person than I am. And I'm not like a loud person, but like I'm more, we hosted a podcast together where I did more talking, and I'm also a little bit more, social. So like I would reach out to the guests and I would be doing the socials, and I did a lot of the forward facing things while PJ was behind the scenes doing a ton of things like the ideas, the website, the like audio production, like all of these like really labor intensive things, which, it wasn't a imbalanced division of labor in the sense that like I didn't do more for it. Like we both did a tremendous amount, but my stuff was more forward facing. And so people just like identified me only with the stuff that we were doing together. And sometimes that was comfortable for PJ. But when it was explicit, I think it was also hard.
They described something that my partner also describes. I believe my partner to be one of the most non-toxic cis men I know. It's most of the non-toxic mask presenting people that I know are queer, are non-binary, are not. They don't identify as a straight white guy.
Yeah,
which he does. But he is also such an ally. He is right there, and he describes this incredible loneliness. Not this ridiculous. There's some trending male loneliness concepts that I find to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Myself,
but I think
as an older woman, it does not take away from anyone's experience or the thing with some of the discourse that I've seen has been a little silly. But this incredible lack of community. Don't know where to go. I am male-bodied, and female-bodied people they want to avoid me because of what the other male-bodied people are like. I don't blame them, but there's, like, it is very hard to make friends with people when you're in a body that is, associated with something people would rather not be around. They'd rather be around a bear more. And PJ started describing this experience, and I was struck by that. I was like, wow, like, where are the non-toxic spaces that are not already predetermined for something else? And I don't think there are any, and it seems like in porn especially, there's just so much. And I appreciate power imbalances are weird, and sexuality and hormones and bodies and social dynamics. It's just, and add business and scheduling and, I can't even imagine. But what he described, I apologize, what they described, thinking of Ben.
No, it's fine.
What they described is what he describes. And I don't know what the answer is. And I felt I felt so much compassion for PJ in this experience of like, I can present as masculine as I like. Being in a female body gives me the privilege of community in a way that I never appreciated until these more recent years when COVID made a break in a lot of our social experiences. And now we have to come back into them. And, and I mean, I'm hearing this similar thing. Like,
I see this with clients. Like I have so many. And I heard this actually more as a phone sex operator, because like when you're an escort, you're in a kind of a different space where you're like, we're on a date. This is fun. You know, not that it's all like fun and light, but you're like with somebody. So they're less talking about their loneliness or whatever, that like when I was a phone sex operator, there was so many men who called in from a deep place of loneliness and saying like, I actually don't know, like a lot of it was absolutely non-sexual because they didn't even care about the sex part of it, or they had a sexual partner and they weren't feeling like, but what they didn't have is a place to take their feelings, and they didn't know how to deal with that. And especially for men who aren't in therapy. But like a therapist can't fill all of those roles, and so, cause a lot of it is social. So like, where do you go for
just having a friend?
Yeah, somebody to talk to, and
it's not a friend, someone to hang out with and be heard by, and and to then listen to and share things with, and
I think that's going back to what you were saying, Milk, in terms of like wanting to just throw it in the trash. PJ has said to me, we've had this conversation, and I can't remember if they said this on the podcast, but they're like, sometimes I think it would be a little bit easier for me if I like presented as like trans feminine, but they're like, actually, I don't care about that. Like they like don't have a big desire to do that. And I was like, well, if you didn't have a desire to do that and you did that, wouldn't it feel a bit like,
performative?
I was going to say performative, but also instrumental or something, to get the kind of social affirmation that you want.
I see what you're saying.
And then they're like, yes, but all of gender is that. So like, I don't actually understand what the difference would be. They're like, I don't care about looking masculine. Like, I also don't care about looking feminine. I think this whole thing is stupid. So like, I just am in this body that I'm in and would like to not have to make that everything about how people interact with me.
Yeah.
Yes.
So much of what we do on a daily basis is people interacting with us based on the way that they perceive us.
Yeah.
And it is weird to have to deal with labels. Like when PJ said, I don't even really identify with people saying, like I'm mask presenting or mask. And funny, I have the same reactions because at times certain people see, a short, curvy body and they think, okay, that's femme presenting. And then other people will see me in clothes that I'm comfortable in and oversized t-shirts and messy hair and no makeup and be like, that's mask presenting.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's none of the above. The answer is B, and I don't care. And I know that we live in a society where people, in order to feel comfortable, have to put things into boxes. But I'm like, the box to check for me is D, none or all of the above. Like, it doesn't ever really matter.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting to me because this is something that this is actually something that I don't want to say I can't relate to it because I understand it insofar as I can, but that's on a very intellectual level because I very much identify as a woman and like that and want that and also look like one. So and also have a curvy body and a feminine presentation. And even to the extent that when I did get a boob job, and part of it for me almost felt like, and I feel like I'm not allowed to talk about this because this isn't language for cis women, but it felt gender affirming to me. I wanted big boobs to go with my big butt and and feel very feminine. I don't know. It felt good to me. It felt like when I did that after my surgery, I was like, I wish I did this 10 years ago because I feel like now my body looks the way that I think that it looks in my head. That's that's the closest that I can get to that. But that was just that I felt like when I did this thing that was fake, I felt more real,
Sure.
And
there is a common thread in queer communities that all plastic surgery is gender affirming surgery.
Yeah, it felt that way to me. It very much felt that way.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I very much think that if I had grown up in a different generation, I would absolutely identify as non-binary. And at this point, it's just sort of laziness. If that makes sense. It's sort of laziness, and it's sort of of all the things that I would like to have conversations with you about, that is not it. Sure. Call it girl. If I had the money, I'd have a breast reduction or I'd have them gone, but that's as much back pain and it's anything.
Yeah.
And it's clothes fitting, but honestly, it's just the ease of being able to buy something off the rack fitting. It's not, it's always been very strange to me, the attachment to anyone's. I respect, I have very feminine friends and family members and very masculine friends. My brother is so masculine. He is 6'8", and if it has been done by a man, he has done it, and he has mastered it. He has done rodeos. He has done surfing. He in construction. He did they do the fishing and the big seas and the craziness.
Does he use the axe on wood? Because that's kind of hard.
Oh, he can definitely do the axe on wood. Yeah, but he prefers a chainsaw. He did tree work, and he's amazing with a chainsaw. He does leather caps. He does
that lumberjack thing. Is I'm not somebody who's super into. I don't know. Sometimes I can't be, but
no,
that's kind of hot.
It's not for me. But I see everyone doing it with my brother, so I get it. Apparently that's a thing.
I mean, we talked about camping before. One of Lauren's favorite hobbies is chopping wood.
Really?
Nice.
That's hot.
Nice.
I've never chopped wood, but I have these nails I have to maintain. It's like a whole
thing.
It's
so cathartic. Oh my God. One of my absolute favorite meditations is just getting a big pile of wood. And at the other end of it is a tired person who just, I've won all of the arguments with the invisible people in my head by the end of that.
So PJ says that they have a beard because I don't know if you all watch Schitt's Creek. Did you watch that?
Yes.
Adore it. Yes.
So the sister's boyfriend that chopped wood.
Yes.
I said oh, you would look really good with a beard like that. And they grew a beard.
Love that.
For me. And then as
that's so lovely.
As you said that you like the Schitt's Creek guy better than me. And I was like, I did not say that. But they've had it for years now. And I'm like,
they look amazing with it. I love it.
Yeah,
I had a very good friend in my 20s who was identified as a woman, was very much wanted a beard.
Yeah.
Very sad that her body would not produce enough testosterone to make that a possibility. It's
My
just an
friend
aesthetic
Jane,
desire.
my friend Nancy, her wife Jane, says that like she wishes she could grow a beard. That would be like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I hate shaving as it is, so I'm grateful for all of the places it doesn't grow. But that's laziness. That's not aesthetic or gender affirming. It's
Meanwhile,
I had my relationship
because I'm an Italian
like,
with like dark hair, so I had my face lasered, and I didn't know. Yeah, so it's great. So I don't have my mustache and stuff.
Right.
But like, apparently, laser does not work on gray hair, and because it seizes on the pigment, so it took off all the like browns because I was like plucking my chin every freaking day, and it took off all of that. But I have a patch of gray ones that comes out every day.
Electrolysis.
I have a mole with a gray one that comes out of it.
Hair.
What's that? Electrolysis? What?
Electrolysis is the only thing that will take care of translucent.
Gray. Yeah. But then it would be just like this one spot. Like, I want you to get this one spot. It seems like kind of, I
just have my awesome little witch mole with one hair that grows out.
That's what it was. And you know what's funny is that PJ would talk about before I got my face lasered. They would talk about my witch hairs, and they would be like, well, why would you do that? Because you're going to lose your witch powers.
Yeah, what's really funny is Lauren talks about the hairs that grow around their nipples as witch hairs, like my hairs. So like,
going back to PJ, it was interesting to hear them talk about what's hard for them, and I mean, first of all, in like what was hard for them about like being a non-binary person and feeling like and going through the sort of medical trauma that they went through and then feeling like they were pushed out. But it was also interesting to hear them talk about what's hard about me doing this work. I'm actually curious, like, Milk, since you listened to it with your partner, like, how did they respond to that? Or did they have thoughts about it?
I really think Lauren was just very intently listening the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And is also just very used to and very prepared to be very open and honest with me about anything that comes up.
Yeah.
And would have like sparked new ideas of what might come up. But we're already poly. Yeah. Lauren doesn't really date other people or will if they really, really like somebody, but is less inclined at like, I have another partner and then maybe two other partners and like people who I would refer to as like comets. And when I see them, we play or whatever. But so I think it was probably just like, we've been through some of this and we've talked about things before, but also more will come up and there will be conversations that we need to have about how involved Lauren wants to be. Yeah. But for now, we're kind of just in a period where they're happy to benefit from it. Mm-hmm. And it was good to see like, early on, it's really easy to be like, I can benefit from this and we could have more freedom in our lives to spend quality time together. But what happens when it gets to the point where you're busy with things that I'm not also involved in.
Right. Yeah. And I think that that's really important. And that's kind of what PJ was talking about is like, well, you're gone a lot and that sucks for me. And it does. And I think that's.
Yeah.
And suddenly.
Yeah. Caretaking an infant is a little bit like having your own business, and I'm firmly enmeshed in that right now. And I felt that for Brett a lot. I was like, right in the middle of talking, it's like, oh, gotta go, bye.
Yeah.
Like, I know we were gonna, but and like,
even like recently we like set a date and was like, oh, I want to watch this comedy special with you, like a date on the couch, which is how we like to do dates. And I was like, let's watch this comedy special. And then, and PJ brought up the fact that it's also has to do with like how much money we need at any given time, because that does shift the dynamic too, because we sat down and then one of my regulars texted and was like, are you busy tonight? And I was like, I actually should take this booking for financial reasons. And also not just that, but also for like longevity with your clients. You want to be the person that they text and if you say no too many times, they move on and go to somebody, so like there's a lot of factors involved. And I said to PJ, I do want to watch this with you. We just sat down. I'm not going to leave like right this second, but like, would you be mad if after this I went and did this job? And they were like, mad? No. Like, we have to do that, but that's not kind of how I wanted to end the night. It was like, we're going to watch this and then you're going to bounce, which is exactly what I did. Yeah. And this is what I appreciate about PJ is that they can hold at the same time. Like, that's not what I prefer, but I also think that there's reasons why I would say yes to that. And I'm not going to punish you for my feelings about it, which is actually something that we've both had to work on because I'm a little codependent and don't want them to be upset about something. And so I would if I'm gone and they're texting me and saying our son is bouncing off the walls, and then I feel like they're mad at me and I need to do something about that. But they're very clear, what are you? There's nothing for you to do. I'm just telling you that our mutual child is bouncing off the walls.
Right.
Which is probably something I should know, but it's hard not to feel to negotiate that where they're this actually isn't your fault. It's just hard. And for me not to be you're trying to guilt trip me for not being there. Which, that's actually those getting through that sort of relational dynamic has taken actually sitting down and naming it and talking about it.
Right.
And
therapy is awesome.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like someone without context could say, and I think PJ mentioned on this, these are, this information sort of discredits or demonizes the work because it's causing issues in your relationship. And replace said work with any other work.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not unique.
No, it's not a sex worker problem. It's a working
human problem. Maybe a capitalism problem.
Yeah.
I mean, think of if the shoe were on the other foot. PJ and I have had some discussions about doing photography work and how photography is jobs can be hard to get in the Pittsburgh area. But if that had taken off, they would be booked all of the time for really high paying jobs and be the person who is,
right. Who's
so
yes, go do this wedding, but that means I'm spending the whole weekend alone.
Yeah.
So, same difference.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And absolutely. I think that the problem with, I think that the hard thing about sex work, and this is kind of what you mentioned, is that it often is the jobs are spread out. You take them when you can get them. But when they come up, the amount of money that you're talking about is hard to say no to. And you're oh, tonight I've already taken off my makeup. I don't feel like doing this, but you're I think I could put it back on for $750. That will pay, for, by the time that you start thinking that, it becomes hard to say no, especially because it's not it's steady. I might not have somebody do that again for another week. And when am I going to buy the
gig work? It comes as it comes. And it, hopefully stick something away, but you aren't.
It's just hard to do.
Getting the bills paid, and that's just all there is. And it disappears so fast with kids. And you just hope the next kid comes
and a house,
before
and
the
you're
last
like,
one
oh
dries
my
up.
gosh, I just had money in my hand and now it's none. I have no money.
Yeah. It just, and I've been working that way since I was unable to make it to a 9 to 5, and it's freaking terrifying.
Yeah,
it's amazing, but I definitely understand not saying no. Paying gig, we're going to work it out. I don't care how little time I spend with people.
I would rather continue to sit on this couch after my comedy show's over, but I don't think I'm going to do that because I
part
should
of me,
work.
there's this little thing back here. It's like, there's not going to be a fucking couch if you don't get some work done.
I know.
It lives back here somewhere. It just, And
there's also like a dynamic that we have, which is that like they have a salaried job. So they only have like so much money that's coming in. And that's not variable. It's not like they can work more or like
they can't put in more hours. They can't hustle for a little more tips. Yeah.
So when it comes down to it of like, oh, things are tight this month, that's me.
That's on you.
Yeah. Like we can pay the mortgage and we have our benefits and everything through PJ's job, but then like all of the rest, like I need to figure out
everything else. Yeah.
So I think it is like that creates this, I don't want to say it's an imbalance because it's not an imbalance because there's like work on both sides of that, but we need to prioritize me going to work, which means that PJ is now going to have to grade the papers with our son running around, and that's just going to have to be how it is.
Can I tell you how cute it is that when you guys met, you were like the philosophy student and very serious, and PJ was green jumpsuit, burner sex worker guy, and now through the arcs of your where you've gone, they are now respected professors, sir. Salaried.
Yes, they have a job.
And
they carry our benefits.
You moved over into this fucking space, this article by article, client by client.
Well, and I was always a gig worker. Like I always had hustles, and they just weren't these particular ones. But I mean, it's just different. We have kind of crossed over in a way.
It's a very sweet thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's nice to hear PJ talk about how your work together and the work that you do now, even though it could, like being a professor, having a spouse who's a sex worker and having done sex work previously could have negative connotations on your career, but because of where PJ works and what PJ teaches, it adds legitimacy and credibility.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, we've just made a lot of collective decisions together over the last 10 years that have like made that possible. And, they didn't go into their PhDs in sociology. They didn't teach in a sociology department, which would have been much more conservative. They're in a gender and sexuality department, and so there's a way that all of even though we kind of crossed and like I left academia and went into sex work and they left sex work and went into academia, that they were always a student too, but it does kind of feel like this crossing. I think that, even though we're talking about like going off in different directions, like both of our careers are very much like, we're very much created in tandem, to fit together.
Yeah. There's a vein.
Yeah. That they're like complementary in some way. And I've gone in and talked to their classes about work I've done. They've assigned a lot of my articles to their students, because they're relevant, not because they're trying to throw me a bone.
I'm sure sex work has also helped. I don't know at what points the two of you were, seeking education, but like sex work money is education is expensive.
Yeah, yeah. And they did camming. I mean, they were in their PhD program like the first 5 years of our 6 years of our relationship. Like they were finishing their dissertation and then also doing camming and then also life, so it wasn't, I left, I was in my PhD program the first year that we were together. And then I quit like when that school year was over because my funding ran out, my stipend ran out. They were like, we gave you a 4-year stipend and the 4 years is over. You're going to have to take out loans now. And I was like, I don't know about that. I don't think there's enough in this for me, like to do that. So, not that I didn't take out any, but I didn't want to be fully supported on loans. And when they were like, no, you're going to have to pay tuition, I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so we were both students the first year that we met, and then we did and then they stayed in it a lot longer and actually finished their degree. But I mean, there's so many ways in which we were so lucky. Like most people who finish their PhD, like have to move to some podunk town somewhere to get a teaching job. And they managed to get one in gender and sexuality, like in the city that we live in. So, I mean, we've just been, that's not lucky. I mean, they did exactly what they were supposed to do to get their way in there, but it didn't, a lot of people do exactly what they're supposed to do and it doesn't work out. So
yeah, PJ is kind of an exceptional human.
PJ is very smart.
The two of you are like the power couple of the alternative world. I like
it. I don't know about that, but like, yeah, but it was actually, I want to say that it was a hard interview for me to do though, because it's hard for me as somebody who loves them to see like how difficult a lot of this has been.
Yeah.
As someone who knows the two of you and has seen the way that you are out in public, at home, it's much more apparent for me the obvious benefits that come with the work that you do, the work the two of you have done.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit easier for me to like listen to the interview and hear how it can negatively impact or like things that they have struggled with and had to work through and establishing boundaries. And I could only imagine interviewing Lauren and processing the same sort of feedback. So I could appreciate that would be a hard thing to do. I really admire the two of you for all the work that you've done. I really admire PJ for being a super community-oriented person and sort of being the same way and having been through. My community is where your community was when the two of you started doing all of that work. And so you just keep going through these cycles of it kind of like blows up in your face. And you're like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Why do I keep doing this? Will it ever get any better?
Right.
And then you burn out and
you just need like one person to make things really difficult.
Yep. Just one. It only takes one and they ruin everything. And they have that insane amount of fire and envy. And just really take it all out.
And it can be like really toxic. Yeah.
And it leads you to a point where you burn out and you remove yourself from the situation and you feel like the community moves on without you and experiences growth. And you're like, okay, well, now I'm not a part of it anymore, but you were a part of it. Like PJ was a part of it. It wouldn't, if the two of you hadn't worked together, if they hadn't worked and done the things that they had done, some of the still existing structures that continue to foster growth wouldn't be there.
Yeah, I think about that sometimes because it's funny because PJ and I started SWAP together, the SWAP Pittsburgh chapter, and neither of us are engaged in it anymore. But it's neat to me because sometimes when people ask me like, well, are there groups in Pittsburgh and what are they doing? And I'm like, I actually don't know what SWAT Pittsburgh is doing, but they are doing stuff. So like you could go there and there's something that feels like at this point now that I don't have a lot of strong, like that I don't feel traumatized by it anymore because it's been time and we've moved on. But like, there's something that feels good about being like, yeah, this thing exists that we like started and it's still going. And I like that it's still going. And I like not being in charge of it. Yeah, they're doing some stuff. Ask them what they're doing. Yeah.
I bumped into and have friends who work with SWAP and have done shows. I've performed at shows that have raised money for SWAP, and
yeah, that's awesome.
That was all before I had met the two of you, so I had like no idea that the two of you were the people who started the chapter in the city that I live in. So it was biggest connection,
and we did it really. It was really intense for like 3 years, and we did a lot of. We fought the DA, on the ways that condoms were being used. And PJ's right. That was very like scary in a lot of ways and very intense. Like we had reporters calling us.
They described it as being like targeted.
Well, yeah, because every time we said something like about the policing in Pittsburgh, I would get on my Jessie Sage website, which is mostly just articles and stuff. People inquiring about what other services I provide, but it always like lined up with that stuff. And I would just like ignore it. But it was pretty clear that they were trying to, they seemed like stings, and I think, and also just like it's wild when your phone is ringing all the time from like reporters in the news who want you to comment on like every single thing that's happening in the city. And there's a certain like adrenaline to that, but like going back to what Melody was saying is that sucked up a huge amount of our like time and energy and took away from being able to like pay our bills. And, there was a lot of personal sacrifice that goes into doing these like large scale social justice oriented organizing. Yeah.
No, that's why it's so revolutionary what Melody's group is doing.
Yeah.
Paying people to, if you haven't caught the episode before this, please do. It's really awesome. Yeah. Getting a fund together to help people get paid to do this unpaid labor that people like yourself and PJ end up doing because it just has to be done. We need one. Well, we need it.
And I think if we would have had some resources like that, we probably could. I mean, in a different world, because also PJ got really sick at the end, which is another reason that we like pulled out of it. But I mean, had that not happened, like, I think that having more resources to be able to do that kind of work without it coming at the expense of like the paid labor that you're doing would have been really valuable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, now that I'm thinking about this, I should tell like, some of the people at SWAP that they should consider doing that so that they could get paid for some of the work that they're doing. But I think that for me, part of it that I still struggle with and that I still have like, I don't know if I have guilt feelings about it because it's not like my fault, but like, was that there was times that people were like, especially with Peep Show, really dismissive of PJ in a way that felt bad. Like it happened all the time that like people would tweet out the episodes and be like, oh, and I did this with sapiotextual. And I'm like, PJ was there, like sitting right next to me. It was like an interviewer too, or, just, I got so heavily identified with the work that we did together that it was like hard on our relationship because I felt like there was a period of time that they were like, wanted to, because it took a little bit of time, I think, to break out, to think of, to come to terms with the fact that like I was getting a lot more credit and recognition for work that we were doing together, but that actually I wasn't doing that. Like it wasn't my fault. And I can I can try to undo it. And I would do things like, oh yes, like PJ and I would do passive aggressive things like, oh, thank you so much, PJ. And I enjoyed doing this, by like continuing to like put them back in. But like there's only so much I can do there because they're right. There is just a resistance for many good reasons, to thinking that of people who they perceive to be men as like hanger-oners who are just trying to extract resources from sex workers. And that is not what was happening in our case. But people don't know that.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. And I feel like one of the reasons it was important for you and PJ to have this conversation on the show, but also just, I mean, like, I really appreciated the episode because I appreciate your history. Two of you. But also, like, I really want people to maybe understand that misgendering someone or making assumptions based on someone's gender can have like a really detrimental effect.
Yeah.
Their career, on the work that they can do.
It had detrimental effects on our relationship for a while, like for a while in that regard of like they felt somehow pushed out of our life,
Yeah. I don't think they were pushed out by you, but in a way that really matters to them. They were. Yeah. You guys had a life together, and then the industry decided you did not, actually.
Right. Yeah.
And it pushes the question how hard PJ would have to, push a persona of them, this is my gender, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is how I'm disabled, this is how my body has been altered just to continue to do the work. And that's not for some people.
Fatigue.
Yeah.
That's where they finally got to. They're like, I actually don't want to do that. I don't want to make my own, like my wounds a brand, which is like what that would require. Yeah. I have to say, like, as somebody who like, very much like loves my partner and is grateful that they did this show for me. I feel like one of the things that I always like appreciate and love about PJ is that PJ can come on and say like, these are all the things that have been like hard about this to me. And yet they're always like, they always have my back. They're always like 100% supportive of like everything that I do. And it's like, that's sometimes hard. Like I have to pretend with my family, like you're a housewife, but we'll just keep doing it.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. But also it feels like, I mean, if PJ had just come on and talk about all the things that are great about you being a sex worker and making good money, then PJ would have sounded like one of those people.
That's true. Yeah.
And it would have been a lie.
Here to benefit from the fact that you're a sex worker.
Right. Because they're much more interested in like, I mean, we all want to like pay our bills, but like they're much more interested in like the relational aspect of like, what does this mean for our lives?
Yeah. And what I heard about them missing from the industry was not the money. They missed the community that did exist in its limited space there. Like, PJ's perspective was, I got off of that one like, whoa, that was a heavy one. That was intense. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, what did they talk about? And I'm like, well, honestly, they criticized the entire industry and Jessie Working, frankly, but in a way they felt very true and authentic and loving and supportive.
Yeah,
like, oh,
I
yeah, I
hope
get
that's
that.
not what people get from it. And PJ, I think, said that too. Like, I hope people aren't listening to this and thinking like that I have regrets or that like I would have chosen a different way. Because, but you could not regret something and still be real about it. Real about its like consequences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the only choice I can see myself ever making, and it was freaking impossible.
Yeah.
Is a really honest statement. Like,
yeah. I feel like it drives home the point that, you know, if PJ is expressing a lot of the way that they're perceived is polarized.
Yeah.
Yes.
So having this conversation, it's possible that people will have a polarized vantage point of the way that it went. But if they had spoken only positively, it would have been completely polarized in the opposite direction.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And and just not PJ.
Yeah. I even like even the story that I wrote, and this is how our dynamic works, but I wrote a story for the paper that Milk is in, and I talked about Milk coming to our house, and then I talked about PJ's response to the like scene that we did, and then PJ was like, I didn't know that you were going to write that, what I said in there. That was something that I said like between us. And I was like, oh, do you want me to take it out? Because obviously I don't want to make them like uncomfortable. I was like, oh, I could totally take that out. And then they're like, no, you do you. I just didn't know it was going to be from the paper, you know, but that's always their response is like, I'm not going to tell you what to write. You're a writer. And they said like, I signed up for this when I decided to be with you. Like, I know that some of our conversations are going to be public. You are a public figure. That's just how it goes. And they're more private than I am, but they're like sometimes I remember even when we did Peep Show, they would get like embarrassed because I would say something, I don't know, about them like plucking my nipples. There's my nipples, random, you know, things that they would be like, why did you just said that? I was like, yeah, I did. And they're like, okay. And I was just like, okay, this is what it is. All right.
I see it from an outside perspective as you being like, but you're such a huge part of my life and what I do, and the things that you say constantly affect my atmosphere in a positive way and reinforce how proud I am of what we've done and who I am. So of course I'm going to talk about you all the time. I talk about Lauren all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
So like,
and I made a very conscious decision when I went into this. I mean, part of it was because we started together, but like I could rebrand and undo this, but like I never don't. Everybody knows I'm married. I talk about it like all the time. Like I talk about being in a relationship. I wear my rings to bookings. People are like, whatever about it, because that's just who you get when you get me. Like I am part of this thing.
It's just part of you. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're also, an academic. Also, you're married.
Yeah. And, and sometimes they're like, how does this work? I'm like, I don't know. I think because I'm married to PJ, like probably wouldn't work if I was married to a different person. I don't know. Yeah. So in terms of wrapping up, this is the last episode before the roundtable. Next week on Monday, we are going to put a roundtable discussion out. We're bringing back 5 of our guests. We are bringing back Milk as a guest and my mother, which I think should be fun. She's very excited to meet the other people on the panel. She listens to the show. And Puxa Plenty from Seattle, who did the episode about fat phobia, fat liberation. And oh my gosh, who are the other 2? Oh, Trip Richards is coming back.
Trip Richards. And Mary Muse.
Oh, and Mary Muse. Yeah, the pianist who we had on. So
it's going to be so much fun. I think
it's going to be really nice. We're going to be talking about what feeds us. The grounding question is going to be what feeds our spirit. But I just want to kind of have a free conversation among the 5 people who've been talking about hustling and work and everything. But we want to get back to like, what do we do to replenish ourselves so that we can do that? So that is going to be next week. That is going to wrap up our season. And then we're going to take 3 weeks off and pump up for season 2.
2 days after that roundtable drops, we're going to do a live after party.
Oh, yeah.
Then we're taking 3 weeks off. But there is one more crumb of content before you live in a barren desert for 3 weeks.
Yeah. But I have to say at the end of this that this has been so enriching for me. Like, I've loved having these conversations, and the after party has been like a huge part of that. And I feel like it's been so interesting to sit back and reflect on all the things that we've learned and to be able to do it in community. Half the season with you, Emily, and then like we brought you in, Milk. And I think that's been so great. And one of the things that I love about this triad of the 3 of us doing this show is that like Emily is outside of the industry. I've been in it for a decade now, and you're kind of starting to find your way in it. And I think that those 3 perspectives coming together and reflecting on these careers is really interesting.
I agree.
It's really cool.
I'm very happy to be here. And I think it's a big privilege to have these experiences, especially coming in when I know that a lot of people didn't and were like finding their way on their own. So like, I view that as a huge gift and like a big opportunity to also bring people to the podcast from my community.
Yeah, so absolutely.
And broaden their view. And I think the after party it's just like, you have to listen to the after parties or watch them, because it's so often people bring information into their lives through podcasts. But if you're not sharing it with someone, if someone else isn't listening with you, like, what is the processing of that information? So this is a very easy way to be like, I was inspired by these things or had these thoughts.
Yeah.
And hear other people processing the same things.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that we are all coming like from different places, because when Emily and I, because we created this show together, thinking about like, what do we want people to get out of it? And part of it is that we wanted to show sex workers in their full humanity, but we wanted to show that to people outside of the community and also to sex workers, like, because it's very easy to get sucked into like, this is your life. And it's nice to remember that we're like whole people outside of that too. So I like that kind of blending of like your community and people outside of sex work and sex workers who've been following me for a long time. I know a lot of my clients listen to this show too. So that's also fun.
Yeah. And I like that you ended with PJ, because the way PJ talks about being affected by what you do and what you've done together speaks to the realness of your relationship and the honesty and how you have a normal relationship that continues to go through things, process. Yeah. Well, so I appreciate both of you hanging out with me and processing this show.
Appreciate you both too. This has been so much fun.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And I can't wait for season 2. We already have like 10 interviews, like half the season is set up because people are into being on the show.
Well, remember next season's going to have more than 20 because we went from bi-weekly to weekly. So we'll actually have like 24 or something like that.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Because we're like
in
the first half of the year and the second half of the year. Yeah.
Right.
So that's exciting.
So season 2 will have a few more episodes in it, which is pretty exciting. If you like what we're doing and you like what you're hearing and or seeing, please leave us a like, leave us a comment, subscribe to our channels, wherever that might be. And don't forget to check us out on Patreon. That's patreon.com/sapiotextual.
Thank you. And where can people find you, Milk, and the work you're doing here in Pittsburgh?
I am on all social medias as Melissa Milk or as at Milk Glass with one S.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you should look up, if you're interested in the work that I'm doing, you should look up Arrow Events, which is the organization that I work with and through to host events that are either social, educational, sex positive, just things to move forward that like community conscious and community health of gender, queer people, BIPOC, anything that you could think of as like a marginalized community is really what we focus on and what we want to create space for.
That's amazing. I love the work you're doing.